This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, the world's leading international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence, and in this series, we are exploring coaching outdoors and how being outdoors is good, if not vital, for our well-being. I'm talking to thought leaders and individuals who share their passion for coaching as they share their philosophy, research and practices with you. Our aim is to inspire you to unlock the potential of coaching when combined with being in nature and outdoors. Welcome to this final episode in our series on coaching outdoors. Today I have with me a very special guest, the author of the book, Coaching Outdoors, Lesley Roberts. Lesley is an executive coach and adventurer who has been coaching outdoors since 1999. After 16 years working with Mars, she founded Brave Conversations, working with global teams and individuals to unlock their potential. In 2019, she founded Coaching Outdoors to bring the benefits of partnering with nature to as many people as possible. In today's episode, we're going to learn about Lesley's profound connection with nature and the transformative power of coaching outdoors. We're going to discuss some of the spiritual aspects of being out in nature, the barriers that coachees may experience, as well as Lesley's tips on how to introduce outdoor coaching gradually, ensuring comfort and safety for clients. I feel this is a fitting episode and the perfect guest to wrap up our podcast season, where we reflect upon the benefits of coaching in natural settings and how this can support not just coachees, but coaches too, with enhanced mental and physical health, as well as developing our relationship with nature. So it gives me great pleasure to have with me today, Lesley Roberts. Lesley, welcome.
Thank you, Rob. It's lovely to be here. I'm so delighted to have been invited.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you as the final episode for this short series. Your name has come up. Your book has been mentioned a number of times. So I'm super excited to wrap up this brief exploration of the topic of coaching outdoors with you today. So maybe we can begin here. I'd love to learn more about your relationship to the outdoors and what does it mean to you?
Fantastic. Thank you, Rob. I see there's huge benefits from coaching outdoors, and I'm really keen to try and offer that to as many of my coaching clients as I can, and to support other coaches to open the door to stepping outside in terms of coaching in collaboration with nature or coaching going for a walk outside. And I think there's three main reasons for that. One of them is the support that the natural world offers to coach and coachee in the process. I know that certainly when I'm coaching outdoors, I feel freer and it feels like there's somebody else in the relationship. So there's somebody else supporting me as a coach. I think I'm a better coach when I coach outside, and I love the opportunity to do that with my clients. There's a massive health benefit. Of course, I know that's been covered in some of the episodes so far about the health benefits, and it's now there's a lot of research around the mental health benefits as well as physical health benefits of being outside in nature. I think, gosh, if we can offer that in a coaching session, I mean, that's just win-win, isn't it? And the third reason really for coaching outdoors and what it means to me is I think it's incredibly effective. So I notice that when I'm with coachees, they get such a lovely sense of perspective when they're outside. It's like their whole person arrives to the coaching session and not just the work person. And that's a really lovely, powerful opportunity to work with a person as a whole. And the perspective that they have when they are outside in nature helps them to be really clear about what really, really matters, perhaps more so than when I meet people at a desk or in a hotel or wherever, where they are focused on what's the thing that's at the top of their to-do list at the moment, or the overwhelm that they might feel. That sense balances out a bit when we're outside. And so coaching outdoors to me means it's just a really powerful way of working with coachees, and it benefits both them and myself.
That's a lovely answer, Lesley. And you've really got me thinking there. All of a sudden, I'm imagining you coaching outdoors, and I'm thinking about the experience of that environment and how it must open people up when you've got that big, expansive view in front of you, perhaps. And that's been my experience, not even in the coaching situation where you're with somebody and you're out outside and you're doing something, we all tend to just A, open up, and B, bring more of ourselves. We tend to present ourselves in a way that the environment dictates, I think. And when we're in four walls or in an office, we're only bringing that part of ourselves out. So I can really relate to what you're saying there, Lesley. And I'd love to get into a little bit deeper about your connection here with coaching, with nature and outdoors, and ask you, can you remember the first time that those three things came together for you?
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I'm going to read a little excerpt, I think is the word. I'm going to read a little excerpt from my book, if that's all right, because I think it sort of succinctly summarises my experience. So it was December 1994, and I was in Scotland. I was in Glencoe, and I was with a group of people on a mountaineering expedition. And I was sitting on one side of Glencoe looking across the glen at Buccleuch Moor, which is the image that many people think of when they think about Scottish mountains. It's a sort of pyramid-shaped mountain and often surrounded either by snow or, if you were lucky, blue sky. So these are my reflections from that moment. I felt tiny and insignificant in the Buccleuch's shadow. I imagined all of life that it had seen come and go. I quietly, respectfully questioned, how long have you been here? What have you seen? How long will you be here after I'm gone? How old is the earth? And in that moment, it became clear to me that what I did in the world didn't really matter, as my time here is so short. I'm not even an ant's footprint on the timeline of life, I thought. Standing looking at the Buccleuch, I had just experienced what Totten describes as well as other than human. We encounter more than human, aspects of reality which are much bigger than we are. These include rivers, lakes, the sea, mountains, winds, sun, sky, and stars. To approach these entities is to remember the true seriousness and depth of existence and just how small we are in the face of the universe. That moment in Glencoe was the first conscious experience I had of being coached by nature, although I wouldn't have known that that's what it was at the time. And that moment for me changed how I viewed my role in the world and what I subsequently have gone on to do. And I've done a lot more exploration around purpose and identity as part of my personal development. And that was my first step towards purpose. And it was that I'm not any more than an ant's footprint. I'm not even an ant's footprint. And I had that insight through what I would now call a coaching conversation with a mountain. But at the time, it just occurred. It was that awe-inspiring scenery.
Yeah, so much in that, Lesley. You remind me in the very first instance of the power of our surroundings when we're outdoors and the profound impact that can have on our soul, I suppose, and how that can change us. And I'm thinking about that point for you, which sounds like a transition point, like a turning point. And I imagine for many of our listeners, they can relate to that too. There's probably points in their lives where they've experienced something that's had a profound impact on them. Upon reflection, a turning point. And that's what I heard there in that lovely brief excerpt from your book there. I've got a question I wasn't planning on asking, but I'd love to ask you, Lesley, because I think this is perhaps important for everyone listening, because either they themselves have dealt with this or this will come up in their coaching. And that is, what did you then do? I mean, you had that moment there that you described from the book, but your life has probably changed considerably since then in terms of your career, your life purpose and all the rest of it. But when you feel such a big shift such as that, and I'm making an assumption here that it was a big shift because it felt very powerful to me. What did you do with that? What was your next step? And what was that first, maybe tiny, or what was that next step that you took then? Or what decisions did you make at that point that have led you to what you do now?
Oh, such a good question. A series of steps, I think. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have sat in 1994 and thought, goodness, look where I am now. It wouldn't have been a linear plan for sure.
Yeah.
At the time, I wasn't necessarily conscious of anything else, I don't think, other than, goodness, I've had this epiphany moment of what I do really doesn't matter. And I had some sense of, for me, it's about, I had an image of a pebble being dropped into a pond, and it's about the ripple effect. For me, it's around what can I do that supports others and has an impact beyond not just myself or another person, but a greater impact in the world. And I was just curious. I was curious about, and what did that look like? What did that mean? I was still at university, so I was still evolving as a human being, as well as evolving what, career path and all the rest of it would look like. I then went on to do some work with a lady called Sue Knight, who is an amazing NLP trainer. And she's just a delight to learn from and develop with. And I took that experience into the work that I did with her and used it kind of as a springboard for more thoughts around purpose and identity. And I have always held on to it. I still hold on to that moment now. And it's a bit of a North Star for me. So I come back to it and I think, God, is what I'm doing honouring that insight that I had in that moment? And if it is, that's great. And I think, it feels comfortable, it feels congruent, it feels that what I'm doing is worthwhile. And if it doesn't, I think, well, why am I doing it? I help it in a way to prioritise some of the things I do in life. And it also it offers me that perspective. It offers me that, gosh, does it really matter if the bedroom's a bit of a tip? Probably not. As long as I still have the opportunity to do what I believe is supporting others and having that ripple effect beyond my time here. So perhaps it's less about a linear progression of evolving from that to now. That's probably been more organic. It's more about I use it as a reference point, which helps me stay sane probably in today's busy world.
That's really powerful. I think what's coming up for me hearing that from you, Lesley, is this sense of, on the one hand, there's this sort of paradox of like, we're so insignificant, but at the same time, what we do doesn't matter, but at the same time, it really matters in a curious sort of interesting way. Another conversation for another day, perhaps. But what I'm really picking up on here, for me, certainly, and this might be partly my own filter and bias, but there's a really strong link between purpose and actually standing in our power. And that's what I was sort of picking up on there and hearing there in terms of that reference point. I love what you said there about it being a non-linear journey. And I mean, who can predict how the world's going to evolve over the next couple of decades? Certainly now with the rapid acceleration of technology and all the rest of it. What we can do is remain in our power. And it's sort of like, regardless of which way the world's going to go, we can flex and adapt within that world, but in a way that is true for us. And that's what I was hearing there. There's something about truth here. And that moment for you, there was a truth there. And I sense that there's a connection between you working in the way that you do with people in the way that you do and helping them to perhaps embody their truth. Is that accurate? Does that resonate with you, Lesley?
Absolutely, completely. And I believe that we are truer to ourselves when we are in nature, because we are part of nature. We're part of evolution. We're part of the system of the world. And all of the constraints that are around us, the computer technology, the boxes that we live in, I mean, that's all constructed. It's not where we came from.
Yeah.
We've constructed that around ourselves. And I believe that divorces us a little bit from our true nature. And by connecting people back with nature, that helps people to be true to themselves, true to others, true to whatever their purpose is. And, some people don't know that. That might be why they come to coaching. Some people do know that, and reconnecting with the natural world really helps them to stay true to it or to come back onto that path that's right for them. So, I believe it's hugely important.
Yeah, that's lovely. So, there's a practical side to this, which I'm keen to ask you about today. I mean, we have touched upon it in the series, but I'd love to get some of your thoughts on what we can be thinking about coaching, how we can approach this practically. But I'm also curious to learn about how your coaching has evolved and perhaps some of the transformations that you've seen. So I guess what I'm asking there really is, when people have presented to you as they've come to you, to your point there about, I want to be coached. And then you've shared the idea of working with them in a way that involves the outdoors. There's sort of two things that I'm curious to learn from you. One, how has that landed with them? So, has that been an easy conversation to have? Is it for everyone? My guess would be it's perhaps not for everyone. And where have you faced sort of challenges around that side of thing? And the other element is perhaps the second part to this question is that what sort of shifts and transformations have you seen or experienced that you feel has been a result of that work that you've done together when you have actually ended up coaching with the outdoors infused into that coaching experience?
Yes. Thank you. So if I start with a bit more of the practicality of, who do I offer it to and how does it land? I offer it in part, and I'll clarify what that means, to everybody I work with. So whether that's individuals or teams, or indeed even I also do line management training programs or leadership training programs, which is sort of broader than pure coaching. And I would offer it to weave it into those programs too. So with individuals, because I think that's probably the cleanest example, partly it depends on geography. So if we are geographically, broadly speaking, in the same area of the country, I will invite the person. I will say, hey, how do you fancy working outside? Maybe we could meet, and I will hold it lightly. I would say maybe we could meet in a National Trust ground near you, or we could meet at a park, or how does that fit for you? Would that it's a lovely opportunity to get away from the computer or away from a desk. And in general, people say, oh my God, that would be fantastic. Such a relief not to be sitting at a desk. They're very enthusiastic. If geographically we are further apart, my approach would be to, listen, we don't have to work over a computer if you don't want to. If you would like a break from your screen, if you'd like the opportunity to go for a walk while we coach, we could do it over the phone. If you would like the opportunity to, sit in an armchair and have a cup of coffee and look at the view from your garden, we could do that too. And I offer it in such a way that I'm not trying to be persuasive, because I'm very conscious of the power that people might perceive that the coach holds. And I don't want to be pushy, and I'm not selling the benefits really. I'm offering it as an option. I would say that geographically, if we're close, most people say, yeah, that's great. I'd love to work outside. That would be super. People who are further apart, it's 50-50. 50% of the people say, oh my God, that would be such a relief. And I have a wonderful coachee who she said she used to take it as an opportunity to lie down. And sometimes she'd lay down in the garden and we were on the phone. She would be lying down under her apple tree in the garden and she'd be looking up at the branches. Sometimes if the weather was inclement, she'd be lying down on her bed with her eyes shut. And she said, it's such a gift not to have so much stimulus all the time. She said, I can really think when we have our coaching sessions because some of the stimulus that I'm bombarded with has been removed. Sometimes we still work virtually over a computer, but I would invite people to take a walk. I generally send people an email about a week before a session, and I would send them an email saying, hey, perhaps you could take a walk before we meet. And in that time that you're out for a walk, just give some thought to what's going to be a really valuable coaching conversation for us to have. What's the exploration that you would like to have in our time together? And just have a walk outside and see what comes to you. So I'm weaving it in and meeting the individual where they are at, perhaps more so than I am trying to persuade them. Hey, we must meet outside. Have you heard? It's brilliant for mental health and it's brilliant for well-being. And, there's this great epiphany stuff because I think that then becomes a bit overwhelming. I feel like I'd be a bit bashing them over the head with it. And I think it changes a power dynamic, which I don't believe is respectful. I try to be as even as possible. So I think maybe that answers the first part of your question.
Yeah.
The second part of your question was around what has been the impact, how have people experienced it? I'll share two examples. So I have one coachee who I've worked with, and I worked with him for a long time outside. So we'd had about 8 sessions, 10 sessions, always outside, always in the same location. And I didn't really mention, I might have said to him, gosh, what a beautiful view, or oh, look at that tree's interesting, isn't it? And I was thinking, oh, he hasn't really responded. He didn't pick up on it. He didn't follow up. He didn't say, gosh, that is a really interesting tree, Lesley. And that makes me think of, or things would be popping up for me as we were walking along. And I would say, oh gosh, I wonder if that sheep maybe feels how you felt when you're describing this situation. And he never said anything. We just sort of carried on walking. And I thought, other than nature as a container for the conversation, I was thinking, well, I wonder if he notices anything. Maybe I'm trying too hard. And yet every time he always said, yeah, I'd really like to meet in the same place. I'd love to do the same walk. And it was only after our coaching had finished, he said, Lesley, I loved being outdoors. I loved the opportunity to be side by side without the eye contact. He said, I felt so much more relaxed. He said, I've never had such good quality conversations with anybody really, because I've always been uncomfortable with the eye contact. I've been uncomfortable with feeling on the spot in the limelight. I was able to be freer when we were outdoors. And he said, I find it difficult sometimes to hold the seniority that comes with my position in a way that's comfortable for me. He said, I now do my one-to-ones with my team. I now do them outside. He said, I go back to the same place that we went to. And he said, I have my conversations with my direct reports on that walk. He said, I have interviewed people for jobs on that walk. He said, if I meet them and we go for that walk and it doesn't feel right, and he's quite a head person, he said, if it doesn't feel right, we don't take the interview to the next stage. He said, if I don't feel I can connect with them out with the office, he said, that's not somebody that's going to be a good fit for our culture. And it's not somebody that I think I'm going to be an effective manager for. So we don't take it any further. And I just thought, gosh, here was me thinking, I'm not sure if this is making any difference to a conversation we might have had indoors. And it was only afterwards that the impact was there. So I guess that would be one example that was completely unexpected for me. Another would be, so this is somebody who I coach and we work remotely. So we have conversations over the phone. And this coach, she sits either in her garden or sits with a view of her garden. And I sit in my garden, or depending on the weather, with a view of my garden. We start on FaceTime. So we start saying hello to each other where we can see each other. And she shows me around her garden and what's happening in the garden and what her view is. And I do the same. And then we turn off the video and we go to audio because, again, I've tried many ways, but if you're doing the video thing, you're then looking at the screen, you're not looking at the view. So I find it's less resourcing. So we're on the phone, and she has said she has a Buddha that sits in her garden, and she talks about the wisdom of the Buddha. And she said it's a little Buddha statue. She said the Buddha's in our conversation, and the Buddha is saying to me, this too will pass. She's also talked about the flowers that are growing in her garden and the growth that she has been feeling in the conversations that we've been having. Or we've had moments where she said, gosh, the vegetables aren't doing so well this year. She said, I feel like that's me. I'm not doing so well this year. And those have been moments where she has reflected on afterwards and shared with me the richness of the environment has offered her so much more than she would have had we been together. She said the impact for me has been that I have been able to relax, and I am also resourced, Lesley, when you're not there, because my garden resources me. My Buddha that sits in the flower bed resources me. My vegetables and the things that are growing in the greenhouse are also a resource for me. And I have to say that's wonderful, because I know as coaches, we're pretty keen not to create a dependency on us. And we're very keen to, always checking in at the end of, coaches typically do 6 sessions and then we have a check-in. Is it appropriate to finish now? And it's a delight to know that when I'm working with people, including nature, that nature is resourcing them. in a way that's very special and in a way that they can still connect with when I'm not there. And that's a gift.
Wow, there's so much to take from both of your answers there. And I think you began to answer my second part of the question in the first one, which I loved. And I love the relationship between those two answers too, and the examples that you've given. And I'm sure our listener will take from what you've shared, what they need. But I'm reminded of a number of things here. One is that the shift and the transformation that can come through coaching in terms of resourcing the people we work with. And in some respects, I know coaching is coaching. There's a lot of talk about what's a mentor, what's a coach. And then there's the teaching and training, which I know you do too. Where are the boundaries with all of this? But I do believe that from a coaching point of view, we are resourcing our clients. We're teaching them. Sometimes we're teaching them approaches and skills that they can then carry on with for the rest of their lives, life skills perhaps, or coaching skills that they can use with their own inner coach, which we all have. And I love what you're speaking to there, Lesley. But I was particularly inspired by how we can support people to find what resources them on their own terms. And I also really appreciated what you were saying about where the power is in all of this. And it's with them, the client. And how often do we as coaches, and I think this is prevalent in the world these days, there are coaches out there that have their own coaching method and a particular approach. And then there's other coaches, perhaps those new to coaching, that feel that they should coach this way and it's got to be done on Zoom, or we've got to be able to meet in person so that we can assess the body language and all the rest of it. Yet perhaps the right answer, if there is a right answer, is to find out what the client needs, what the coachee needs, and meeting them on their own terms there. And I love your sort of adaptability and flexibility in what I heard there, Lesley, in terms of what's needed. That's the question that's coming up. What's needed right now that's going to support this person there from a resourcing point of view? So I love that. I also heard a little bit about the ripple effect you mentioned earlier in our conversation. And sometimes we see that ripple effect, often we don't, but it's really nice. It's a really nice example that you gave there. I love that when we find out that actually, I see this with my children a lot, is I think they don't listen to me, but then I see them go and do something and I think, they must have heard what I said, because they wouldn't have known if they weren't listening. And it's perhaps a similar thing. And for so many people, particularly you and I both have corporate backgrounds, but there's a lot of headstrong people there that, and this is absolutely true for me, where you kind of lose that connection between head and heart. And it's lovely that to witness something where somebody might be reconnecting with that part of themselves through a place, and to the point where they are now taking people to this place because it's become somewhat perhaps even sacred. You could even perhaps use that word to them. And off the back of that, Lesley, I'm really curious to ask you this, because it's come up quite a bit in the conversations that I've been having around coaching outdoors up until now, where with some coaches, almost a bit of an emphasis in terms of coming back to sort of method and approach and that kind of thing. I would love to learn from your experience whether there are particular trails, surroundings, environments that you go to consistently when you work with people, because you've been able to cultivate a relationship yourself. So what I've been picking up on is there's perhaps a benefit to, as individuals, as coaches, developing and cultivating a relationship with a particular environment first, so that when we then bring somebody into that environment, there's a further benefit. So could you perhaps speak to some of that in terms of your own experience, Lesley? I'd love to hear that from your point of view.
I can, Robert. And it's such a great question. And I'm going to say it depends. So I feel more resourced and more comfortable and at my best as a coach if I am in a location or an environment that I know. So I have 2 or 3 places that are my go-to places for coaching outdoors. And what that offers me is I have a relationship with that place. It's a place I know, and it's a place I go to for my coaching, for my development, my time in nature, my thinking space. And I am familiar with what is there. I'm familiar with the resources that are there. I'm familiar with the paths. I'm familiar with the shortcuts. I'm familiar with what to do if it's tipping it down with rain or the wind. And because I know the area so well, I know that if the weather's inclement, if I walk in this direction, it will feel more comfortable because the wind will be behind us. If I walk in that direction, that's great because we'll come to a wood which will shelter us if it's tipping it down with rain. I know that if I walk that way and it's a bright, bright sunny day, the sun's going to be in our faces and that's going to not help us to feel relaxed. Or if I go this way, there's more shade. So I feel that I have more flexibility in that area and I feel better equipped. I know where the benches are. I know if the conversation's going on, when to turn around or when to do the loop. So it works well for me. And I feel I am a better coach for my client because I let go of any concerns I might have about being lost, getting wet, all of that stuff that as coaches, if we work outside, we may be, and I say may because it isn't true for everybody, but we may be holding. I know of other coaches who love going to a location that is either the coachee's choice because they feel or they've contracted that the coachee is more comfortable in a location of their choice, a place that's special to them. And again, there possibly comes back to that power dynamic of you're gifting the power definitely to the coachee if that, and I'm conscious when I say that, that presupposes it's mine to gift. On location choice, it may well be that if it's my location, perhaps the coachee feels I am more in control. The coachee chooses, perhaps they feel more in control, and that offers them a safety, perhaps a psychological safety, and that probably matters to some coachees. The location choice might be really important. And some coaches like that sense of unknowing because they are stepping into the unknowing of what's going to unfold in the location, as much as the coachee might be stepping into the unknowing of what's going to unfold in coaching this thing I've never done before and you're my new coach, etc. So I believe as coaches, our role is to be clear on what resources us best and to meet the needs of our coachee. And don't get me wrong, I've gone to places that I don't know and it's been fine. I feel I do my best work in a location that I do know. And I encourage everybody, every coach that I meet and that I work with, I encourage them to just be clear about making it a conscious choice. Make it a conscious choice. If you choose a location that you don't know, why did you choose it and what does it offer you or not? If you choose a location that you do know, why have you made that choice and what does that give you? So just making it conscious.
That's a really insightful answer, Lesley. You've encouraged us to think about or to give a lot of thought to the place in terms of our own relationship to it. If it's on the coachee's terms, are we comfortable with that and thinking about our own boundaries and making sure we're not giving too much power to our coachee? We've got to be well resourced and safe ourselves. So there's so much to think about there. And I think that this shouldn't be something, what I'm picking up on is this shouldn't be something that we should take lightly and overlook. I think, and your book, I know, talks about this. Preparation is, I think maybe there's so much more preparation when we're coaching outdoors to think about from a coaching point of view. I think to a point you made just a moment ago, Lesley, we want to make sure that we're coaching well and all our focus, energy and attention is going into the coaching when we're in that environment and then using that environment as a sort of a powerful support to the coaching. We don't want to be not paying attention to our client because we're worried about some of the risks that might be surrounding us. So I think that's really well emphasized there. Thanks, Lesley. I really appreciate that. You've got me thinking now about a couple of other things that you mentioned earlier, and I'm starting to think about perhaps limitations for some people in terms of, I can imagine that for some people, coaching in an unusual environment might be a bit challenging for them. There might be some other perceived limitations. So I'm kind of curious to lean into some of your experience here in terms of perhaps perceived limitations. And also actually as a coach, because I know as coaches, one of the things that many coaches do is try and spot challenges and limitations for the client and call those out and use that as an opportunity to grow and stretch. So I'm curious, Lesley, how you do that. How do you pick up when working with people on what might be a a real limitation or a perceived limitation? And then how do you work with those limitations in a way that then perhaps takes your client into an environment that fosters growth, that might be a little bit of a stretch for them, but in a way that is also safe and comfortable in the right way?
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I think there's perceived limitations for clients and for coaches.
Right.
So I will start with the coaches first and come back to the clients. So the programs that I run, I work with a lot of coaches who are interested in working outdoors with coachees. And often we will cover a load of the things that I feel are going to resource them to be able to step outside. And still we get to the end of the program and people say, yes, but how do you take that first step? How do you take the step to being outside with a coachee? And my guidance for all coaches who want to work outside is, first of all, that comes back to that point of feeling resourcing yourself so that you are at your best for your coachee and have everything available to you for the coachee, and putting in place whatever you need in order to be able to do that. And the second sort of piece of advice I would give to coaches is, whatever you do, just trust that you are a great coach and your relationship with your coachee will be strong enough that if you were to go outside and offer a question, as I have with clients, where I've said, oh, for example, the sheep earlier with the client example, look at that sheep, that does that resonate for you with your situation? And the coachee sort of didn't say anything. And I thought, oh, that didn't land very well. I think just trust that you might offer that, and it's okay that it hasn't landed or it didn't resonate. It's the same as any coaching question that we ask. As coaches, we ask questions all the time. Sometimes we ask a question and we think, God, that was brilliant. That was inspired. That really unlocked something. Sometimes we ask a question, the coachee just looks at us a bit blankly. And I say, this is just the same for coaches. If you think you want to step outside, or if you think you want to bring nature into your coaching, if the desire is there, just trust and give it a go and start gently. Start with a friend, pretend it's a coaching session, start with a friend, give it a go in a lovely, safe environment. If you want to draw nature in a bit more, but you're concerned about how it will land, trust that it's just like any other coaching question, that it will be okay. If it resonates, great. If it doesn't resonate, move on. The relationship won't be damaged by it. So that would be for coaches. For clients, gosh, there could be many reasons that clients don't want to go outside or perceive that there's a barrier. So it's many and varied, and I won't be able to cover them all, but some of it will be possibly physical. They're concerned that you're going to take them 10 miles up a hill and that they're not fit enough to do it. Some of them, it might be that they have mobility issues, and actually, being outside or on uneven terrain might be challenging for them. For some people, it might be psychological. It might be, I feel more exposed when I am outside rather than in a room. So there are lots of reasons. And my experience tells me that offer what feels appropriate and offer it step by step. So a client of mine once said to me, Lesley, you took me in at the shallow end and you led me to the deep end. And I love being at the deep end, but I couldn't have gone there when we first started. And he was talking about overtly bringing nature in and the more spiritual side that I often find arises when we draw nature into our coaching conversations. As coaches, we will have a sense of, is this a real barrier or is this perhaps a perceived barrier? For people who, if they have mobility issues, I invite them to share what might be possible for you. Do you have an interest in collaborating with nature in our coaching? And what might be possible? What might you need to make that happen? What feels comfortable for you? Where might we start? And it might be that we start on a virtual session and that I invite them to look out there. I'm pointing here, my window's over here. I invite them to look out the window and just say, what's the weather doing outside your window today? Let's take a moment in our session where we just take a breather and we look out the window and we connect with what's happening with the weather. And they'll come back and I'll say, and how was that for you? Or I might invite them to think about what's your internal weather doing? How is it feeling for you? What's the weather inside? Is it sunny? Is it rainy? Is it windy? And bringing things in, or bringing nature in that way, and step by step. And sometimes I've worked with a coachee. I was at Ashridge Business School. We are in the most incredible grounds. There are little secret spaces. There were, walled gardens. There's a rose garden. There are benches. There are long walks. There are avenues of trees. There are big vistas. I mean, there's everything that you could possibly ever hope to choose from a natural landscape, apart from true wilderness. There's everything there. It's just amazing. And I was working with a coachee, and I said, should we take a walk outside for our conversation? And the coachee was very clear, absolutely not. And inside I was thinking, please, please, please. It's so beautiful. There's so much. There must be a space. And my internal voice was saying, there must be a space. And I realized that for that client, in that moment, there might be another time where that would be appropriate. But for that client at that time, they wanted to stay inside. They felt safer. They felt more contained. And for them, it was really important for that coaching conversation to be indoors in the room that we were in. They felt safer there. And it was at the start of the session. And I didn't know this person very well. And I thought, okay, we'll stay here. I mean, I was managing my disappointment. It was early on in my career of bringing people outdoors coaching, people I didn't know. I thought, okay, we'll stay here. And we did. And for that person in that moment, it was absolutely the right decision. So it's a balance, Rob. It's possibly breadcrumbs to bigger into a sandwich, possibly not,
Yeah. The parting image I have from your answer just then, Lesley, is this one of the shallow end and the deep end. And I love that, because that's a really easy image for me to hold on to in terms of the steps that we can take. Whereabouts are we in this? Are we jumping into the deep end, or actually what would the shallow end look like for the next step here? That's really wonderful. I mean, that I'm enlightened just hearing that, in terms of knowing how to proceed with somebody when we're looking at potentially taking, as you mentioned earlier, coaching's full of risks, even when we're asking questions, but maybe making suggestions, and we could do it like this, or we could do it like this, thinking where that shallow end might be for us there. And just as a little side note, our listener won't be able to see this, but I'm assuming there's a window to your right, because I realised that as you keep looking outside, which speaks to your relationship to outdoors, which I love, Lesley. You also mentioned there, and this would be a wonderful conversation I'd love to get into if we weren't so short on time today. You mentioned spirituality there, and I would love to know about your experience with that. But maybe just briefly, I would love to know from your own point of view, as a person, as a coach, how this relationship with the outdoors has changed you, perhaps spiritually. I know that's a big question.
Oh, Rob. If somebody asked me if I'm religious, I'd say not in the traditional sense of sort of Western world traditional sense of church and God, but absolutely I would say I am spiritual, and I feel a real sense of connection to nature. And I think the things that people typically find in religion, belief, support, community, a place to go to in times of celebration or times of worry or times of bereavement, a place to turn, that absolutely embodies what nature offers me in terms of that spirituality and a sense of hope. The other piece that nature offers me in a spiritual sense is a little piece of magic. Some things I can't explain. Some magic. I have a little girl and she's 9, and we talk about fairies and fairy magic. And I mean, I hope she's not listening. Whilst I don't believe in fairies per se, I do believe in the power of nature. I believe in magic and miracles that happen in nature. And I think nature proves to us time and time and time again that there is magic and that there are miracles. nature herself, everything that we see on planet Earth that has evolved is magical and is a bit of a miracle. And nature thrives in adversity. I think that for me just offers hope, connection, positivity. Yeah.
I'm so glad I answered that question, Lesley, because that feels like such a fitting end to our series here, to park it at the theme of sort of magic and hope. And I can really relate to what you're saying there. And as I said, there's probably a much deeper conversation another day going into all of that, and some wonderful reminders there, which I'm sure will resonate to many people listening to this episode today. So as we begin to wrap up, I've just got a few closing questions, if I may, Lesley. I'd love to get a sense of perhaps some useful resources. Of course, you've got the book, and I'd like to ask you about that. But I would like to ask you about the book first. Why write a book, Coaching Outdoors? I mean, it's been referenced heavily in the series so far, both on and off air. And it's a wonderful book. I've flicked through it. I've deliberately not read it until after this conversation. So I'm curious, what inspired you to write the book?
Oh, well, first of all, I said I'm never going to write a book. I was absolutely adamant. It's a long time ago. I said I'm never writing a book. And then it became really clear that, oh my goodness me, I have to write this book. And the reason for doing it was I'd developed myself in this world of coaching outdoors. I was running 2 programs for coachees to support them in coaching outdoors. And those coachees were asking for, do you have a resource? Are there handouts? Are there notes? Is there a book? Is there a manual? And the answer at the time was no. So I felt it would offer support to the coaches who'd been on the programs. And then other people that I met along the way who were other coaches kept saying to me, we'd love to come out, can we come and spend some time with you? Can I ask you some questions? Have you got half an hour for a phone call about how you, collaborate with nature in your coaching conversations? And at this point, I thought, okay, there's a bit of a need here from others. It came back to this ant's footprint in the timeline of life. What's the thing that I could do that would be the positive pebble, the positive ripple in the pond, the thing that would extend beyond me and might reach more people than I could reach, either through the courses I run or through the conversations that I have? What's accessible for people and what might support them? And it grew from there, really, to be honest. And I'd done a bit of writing when I did my dissertation, when I did my master's in coaching. So I had, if I'm honest, I had a bit of a starter for 10, having done the programs and my dissertation. So I had a bit of the groundwork already done. And it sort of made it easier for me to say yes to doing it. And there was nothing out there. So when I did my research in this field, there was little available. There was little that related specifically nature and the benefits of nature to coaches and client and coaching. And I was scrabbling around and I thought, gosh, there's really nothing. So I wanted to offer something in this space as a starter for 10, because I'm hoping there'll be more. I wanted to offer a starter for 10.
Well, it's a wonderful starter for 10. I mean, I've got my copy right here, and one flick through the contents. I mean, that was the thing that blew me away. For somebody new to this subject, relatively new to this subject, there's so much you've covered in here, just flicking through the various different sections and flicking through the book. There's activities, there's checklists, there's guidance, there's images. If you are interested in this, I strongly recommend to our listener to go and check your book out, Lesley. I think it was Picasso that said a painting's never finished. So you've written the book. I imagine since then you're still learning. There's more resources out there. Is there anything that, since writing the book, that you would recommend perhaps for coaches new to this subject like myself? What else could we go and look at or check out that you think might be really useful to give us a bit of a footing, no pun intended, into this world?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I am so excited because there are so many more resources now. I think there's still opportunity for more if anybody's listening and thinks, oh, I'm interested. Loads of opportunity for more. But I think I would advise people to listen. There's this podcast series, which is great, and people will pick up top tips along the way through listening to this. There's the Coaching Outdoors podcast series, and I think there are 70 episodes now. I mean, that's a great source of listening to coaches and hearing how they do it. Everybody does it slightly differently. How do they do it? What can you pick up from that? I think there's an opportunity for developing your own practice in collaborating with nature and having nature as your coach. So there's a little bit about, without looking on the internet for resources, there's this amazing resource outside your door, and stepping out and finding out, how does nature resource you? What does nature offer you as a coach? And what experiences do you have? And then offering those to some of your clients. You'll find yourself drawn to a smell or a pebble and just noticing what you're drawn to. And by using yourself as instrument, you will find resources to offer to others in your practice. So I'd strongly encourage people to do that. And there's some great work being done by Professor Miles Richardson from Derby University, and he talks about the pathways to nature connectedness. And his research, I believe, is so powerful that as coaches, we can take our own journey in collaborating with nature through those. There are 5 pathways, through the 5 pathways. And the work's brilliant. It's really accessible. It's easy. You don't need to be an academic to understand it. So I would encourage everybody to have a look at that. And as a spring off from that, the Wildlife Trust, they used Professor Miles Richardson's work to do their 30 Days Wild program that they run. The National Trust, they have 50 things to do before you're 11 3/4, I think, which came as a result of that work. And I'd say, this isn't just about coaching. This is about us as human beings connecting with nature for our personal development and what we can offer to others. And that might be, as a parent, that might be doing 30 Days Wild with your children. It might be doing with your children 50 things to do before you're 11 3/4. It might be the walk that you do with your teenage children or your children in their early 20s, where you go for a walk and they talk to you because you're outside side by side. Or people talk about, I have great conversations in the car. I think, God, of course you do, because you're collaboratively next to each other. And with friends, take walks with friends, take walks with parents. Those are the most amazing resources. Turn to nature first and she'll resource you, as well as what are the books, what are the programs, what are the courses.
Yes. Such a great answer, Lesley. And I urge our listener, as I will do, rewind those last 5 minutes and just listen to the inspiration and ideas there. And I almost set myself up there. I was thinking podcasts and books, but of course the outdoors, that makes so much sense, and using ourselves as instruments to receive inspiration. So with that theme in mind, Lesley, my final question before I ask where our listener can connect with you is, what's inspired you in the last 7 days?
I am going to share with you the biggest inspiration that I have had is there was a Coaching Outdoors live event at Henley Business School where lots of inspirational people from the world of coaching outdoors came together and ran workshops. There were 120 people that attended, coaches who are interested in collaborating with nature in their work. And having been on this journey for quite a while now, to suddenly have all of those people in the one place, both the people who knew some stuff and had things to share, as well as the people who were interested in learning and developing and networking, that was hugely inspirational to me, because it gives me such hope for what can this be? What can we bring? There's such power, I think, in bringing nature to every conversation. I believe there's power for the coach, the coachee, for organizations, and for the environmental benefit, because we have, if we love nature, we will protect it. And that's one of the reasons that I do what I do. And seeing all of those people together in that wonderful natural environment next to the river at Henley, and nature very much being part of that movement, really inspired me. It was kind of this perfect moment of, wow, we're getting somewhere. There's some traction here, and people believe in the power of this, and hoping that those people who were there will carry on the momentum and will take it to other people who benefit from it.
Oh, that's lovely. Thanks for sharing that, Lesley. And thank you for sharing your energy, enthusiasm and wisdom and expertise with us today. It's been a real honour to interview you and have a chat with you as a very fitting last episode to this series for the Association for Coaching. So no doubt I would be very surprised if our listener didn't want to learn more about you, Lesley, and connect with you. So where's the best place to connect with you and find out more about you, the work that you do, and of course your book?
Yeah, thank you. So the book is available on Amazon if anybody is interested in buying it. I have a website, www.coachingoutdoors.com. And in the website, there's loads of resources. There's lots of articles. There's some podcasts. This podcast episode will be on there as well. And I also run programs. So I run Getting Started Coaching Outdoors for people who are interested in sort of setting the foundations to their practice. And I run a program called Nature as Co-Facilitator for people who are experienced coaches who want to dive a bit deeper with nature as a co-facilitator in the relationship. And all of that information is on the website. And also I'm on LinkedIn. If you just stick my name in the toolbar, in the search bar at the top, you'll find me on LinkedIn as well.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Lesley, for joining me today.
Thank you, Rob. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. Explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, signature programs, member benefits, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools, models, and the latest industry trends to help you develop and increase your coaching expertise.